The RBI's Monetary Policy Committee hikes the benchmark repo rate by 35 basis points as expected, decides to remain focused on withdrawal of accommodation. Repo rate is now at the highest level in more than 5 years. Today's hike is also the lowest in the rate hike cycle.
While we recognize and we state that the worst of inflation is behind us, but there is no room for complacency.
RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das says the worst of inflation is behind us, but advises caution going ahead and retains the FY23 forecast at 6.7%. Also cuts the full-year GDP growth forecast from 7 to 6.8%. Stock markets see some wild swings. Sensex and Nifty end in the red after the RBI's rate hike. Rupee gains against the dollar but remains above the 82 mark.
We are very closely looking at it and what the position is. Based upon that, if need be, we'll calibrate our deposit rates.
While there is a 25 basis point hike, there is a bit of a hawkish stance in the policy statement.
20-25 basis points hike in rates in the next policy, but then there will, to my mind, be a clear stop thereafter.
India's top bankers say RBI's policy stance remains hawkish and expect another rate hike in February, but expect demand for longer-term loans to sustain despite the monetary tightening. Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia calls for a meeting with the management of all major airports after scenes of overcrowding and serpentine queues. The minister tweets that airport authorities have been asked to plan for peak hour capacity, assess baggage X-ray capacity, implement tech upgrades for faster security clearances. India needs to build greater capacity to reduce the reliance on imports, says Boeing India's President Salil Gupte. This comes after Civil Aviation Ministry called for curbing imports of aircraft, which had gone up by 56% in the first 6 months of this fiscal. The winter session of Parliament gets going. The Congress and the Trinamool Congress protest against being denied chairmanship of parliamentary standing committees. Congress President Kharge calls for a meeting of opposition parties to evolve a joint strategy. The government is planning to table as many as 16 new bills during the session. After widespread protest, China starts to move away from its stringent zero-COVID policy, allows people with COVID who have mild symptoms and their close contacts to quarantine at home instead of forcing them into centralized quarantine facilities. Aam Aadmi Party wins majority in the 250 ward Delhi Civic body, looks set to wrest control from the BJP after 15 years. This is the first election after the reunification of the 3 Delhi-based municipal corporations. The Congress comes a distant third. A 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court concludes hearing pleas against the demonetization of 500 and 1,000 rupee notes in 2016, asked the union government and RBI to submit files leading up to the decision. RBI had backed the move before the court, calling it an integral part of nation building. India's wedding industry is back with a bang after the pandemic. 32 lakh weddings are set to take place this year, which could mean earnings of nearly 4 lakh crore rupees. A special report coming up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Woohoo!
Fabulous experience it really has been for all of us here at CNBC-TV18 to chronicle India's story.
Asset allocation is key. It was important yesterday, it is important today, it will be important tomorrow.
When we hear about this 10-year, 20-year bull run in India, and everything looks like a Ram Rajya, at that time we have to be little cautious.
Real estate is about location, location, location. Equity markets are about earnings, earnings, earnings.
And so many new businesses we have not even thought about are getting conceptualized, and the spirit of entrepreneurship.
CNBC-TV18 turns 23 today. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all the viewers for your continued support, faith and trust over all these years. We continue to remain India's #1 business news channel, and thank you once again for all the support. Let's begin with the big story this evening. Yes, the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee hiked its benchmark repo rate by 35 basis points, capping its fifth hike this year, also the lowest in the rate hike cycle. 5 out of MPC's 6 members voted in favor of the rate hike. The repo, which is the rate at which RBI lends to banks, now stands at 6.2%. It is the highest since August 2018. The Monetary Policy Committee also decided to remain focused on withdrawal of accommodation stance. The RBI also trimmed its GDP growth forecast for FY23 to 6.8% from 7% earlier, citing geopolitical tensions and global slowdown. It expects the first quarter of the next fiscal year to record a GDP growth of 7.1%. Meanwhile, the inflation forecast for FY23 has been retained at 6.7%. Governor Shaktikanta Das said that inflation is expected to moderate, but the battle against inflation is not over. He added that the course of the future policy will duly consider new data releases and the evolving outlook of the economy. Lata Venkatesh is here with her take on the monetary policy.
Yes, as everyone has pointed out, 35 basis was exactly as expected. What was unexpected was the Reserve Bank's determination to chase down inflation. Just listen to what the governor and the deputy governor said.
India's GDP growth is resilient. It is holding on and it is doing well in a world of slowing growth and possibilities of recession across several countries.
The worst of inflation is over, but the moderation of inflation will be very grudging, very uneven. So we must shepherd inflation first firmly into the tolerance band and then to the target.
Okay, so for the key takeaways for me, one, the governor is very confident of growth. So he wants to use that cushion to do some good macros building, which is bringing down inflation. The second takeaway is, the governor clearly told me in a reply, policy is still accommodative. Look, liquidity is surplus and real rates are negative. That is, interest rate is lower than the inflation rate. So that clearly indicates he thinks there is space for more rate hikes. That is a clear takeaway. The next takeaway is, the sentence where they explain their stance, he has he has added a phrase that we have to break the persistence of core inflation. That sentence didn't exist before. Now, this is a new addition, which means Reserve Bank is going to start monitoring core inflation. So far, they've never put it on the table so clearly. So that becomes another takeaway and a hawkish one at that. And then Dr. Patra's statement that inflation will come down very grudgingly. The Reserve Bank seems very clear that it's not going to be an easy fight against inflation. It's going to come down slowly. That's again a hint that they may have to do more work, which means more rate hikes. And finally, the conclusion we can therefore come to is one more hike seems a given, because they are saying we have, it is still accommodative policy. Whether there will be a second will depend on how core inflation behaves. Now, even if the March inflation forecast has been raised by RBI from earlier 5.8 to 5.9, what if it is 6? That means for 15 months, they are still above target. So chances are that will increase the chances of yet another hike. The peak rate could be 6.5. It's definitely going to be 6.5. It could even be 6.75. This was the shock for the market. The market had factored in possibly a peak at 6.25 and then some pause. Today, you saw all the yields going up, both the spot yields as well as the overnight index swap yields, as the market started pricing in one more rate hike in February.
Governor has kept the door open for a possible small hike in the next policy, possible. That is perhaps will emanate out depending on the data that comes through. So at most, I repeat, 20-25 basis points hike in rates in the next policy, but then there will, to my mind, be a clear stop thereafter.
I think deposit rates will be a function of how we look at our asset liability mismatch. So I think we are very closely looking at it, and what the position is. Based upon that, if need be, we'll calibrate our deposit rates too.
I think the stance is that we need to get inflation under control, and that also very clearly implies maybe another hike of 25 basis points before things stabilize. The hope, while the inflation is coming down, RBI has also very clearly tempered the growth expectations on the GDP side. So it's a balancing act.
So Indian interest rates, even though have gone up, but as far as the access to, on a relative basis, to domestic markets is attractive. That is why the cost of financing has gone up, but I don't think because of which any company will hold the capex, because the long-term story of India is very encouraging.
All right, let's get you all the market action. A volatile day of trade saw the Nifty and Sensex end the day lower, while mid-caps underperformed, banks fared slightly better. Reliance was among the top Nifty losers, while IT stocks were also a big drag. In the money market, the rupee managed to gain against the dollar, snapping the two-day losing streak. However, the rupee remains above the 82 mark against the greenback. Here are some market experts with their outlook.
Longer-term strategic prospects for India and for the Indian stock market, we think are actually among the best, if not the best, in Asia. Just to give a couple of numbers here, our long-term view on GDP growth for India at 6% or a bit above is one of the highest, if not the highest, in the region.
Big picture is that everybody should invest in equities. Over time, equities outperform fixed income. Over time, equities outperform property for most of the investors, maybe not for developers. And therefore, there should be a reasonable allocation to equities, which Indians did not have for a long, long time.
We just pick and choose things that suit our point of view. And the point of view right now is that India is expensive, and I don't know on what metric they call it expensive. And therefore, India needs to underperform. And therefore, we will pick data points to suit that point of view, irrespective of whether the data makes sense or not. My view is simply that 2023 is going to be even better than 2020.
These are very good businesses.
Yes.
I would say they've created tremendous platform. They have a very good corporate governance. Some of the leaders who are leading these companies are extremely passionate and good. So I've started spending time on these companies, and I'm sure somewhere down the line they will become good buys.
We have a lot of budding entrepreneurs who want to, do something for their own self, for the businesses, and I think that is what mid-cap and small-cap is all about. It's all entrepreneur-driven businesses, and the good thing is, if you see, so many unique businesses are coming up, and so many new businesses we have not even thought about are getting conceptualized. As long as the spirit of entrepreneurship is there, and as long as growth is there, the smaller and mid-sized companies will always grow faster than the large caps.
Infosys kickstarts its 9,300 crore share buyback process. The company will be buying the shares at a maximum price of 1,850 rupees per unit till next month. The move comes as part of the company's capital allocation policy, which mandates Infosys to return 85% of its free cash flow until 2024 via dividends and buybacks. In the IPO space, winemaker Sula Vineyards has announced the price band for its initial public offering at 340 to 357 rupees. The bidding for anchor investors is set to begin on 9th December. The IPO is set to involve a pure offer for sale of over 26 million shares, with the issue size coming at 960 crore rupees. Luxury car maker Audi announces a price hike of 1.7% across all of its models. This will be effective from the 1st of January 2023. The German brand has cited rising input and operational costs as reason for this hike. It is not just Audi, Maruti Suzuki, Tata Motors, Hero MotoCorp, Renault have all announced price hikes this year. Moving on to a big story we've been following over the last few days. Air passenger traffic is nearing pre-COVID levels, and it's putting pressure on India's airport infrastructure. Most of the country's busiest airports are dealing with large crowds, serpentine queues, and longer than tolerable wait times, both at security checks and at immigration. CNBC-TV18's Madiha Mujawar reached out to some of these airports to find out what steps they're taking to make air travel more comfortable for passengers.
Overcrowding at airports, passengers fighting over their place in long queues, and indifferent security personnel. This has become a frequent sight at most metro airports. Several passengers have been writing about their horrid experiences at the Delhi airport. On Tuesday, Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia assured on Twitter he's looking into the matter. And today, the minister held a meeting with the heads of all major Indian airports, CISF and Immigration Department to find a solution for smooth processing of domestic and international passengers. 5 initiatives were outlined in the meeting. This includes increasing passenger processing capacity at each major airport, landing cards to be distributed on board and filled up prior to arrival so as to minimize queues at immigration counters, X-ray capacity for baggage to be assessed, capacity augmentation of security manpower and hand baggage screening, and lastly, longer-term technology-related upgrades for security and baggage drop-off processing. The minister has clearly conveyed passenger convenience is topmost priority. Earlier, the Delhi International Airport had also shared the steps it has taken to tackle the crowds. DIAL said it has deployed 26 additional staff to help passengers in the entry forecourt and security area. It also said it is in discussions with airlines to reduce peak hour departures from Terminal 3 and is working on shifting a few flights to other terminals. But this has not stopped several passengers from continuing to recount their own poor experiences at airports. Complaints range from missing their flights despite arriving well in time, to the inability of staff to operate equipment, to unhelpful and in some cases rude CISF personnel.
I saw those visuals and I've been experiencing that chaos as well. Consumer sentiment is positive. Some of these things need to improve in terms of more capacity needs to come in and therefore fares need to get rationalized and the operational chaos has to get over.
Delhi airport sources tell CNBC-TV18 that the situation is out of their hands. They claim the delays are primarily at the terminal entry and security check-in areas which come under the CISF jurisdiction. The immigration counters, meanwhile, are manned not by airport officials but by government employees. They say while the airports have provided enough counters for security check, there are often not enough CISF staff to man all of them. Experts say a quick resolution will be crucial because the Christmas and New Year vacation is around the corner and passenger traffic is bound to spike further, putting more pressure on airport personnel and infrastructure. In Mumbai, Madiha Mujawar.
Right, and the aviation minister has now intervened. He held a high-level meeting asking the CISF and the airport authorities across the country to put more staff to manage these huge crowds. And staying with the aviation sector, Boeing India's Salil Gupte has called for greater capacity building to reduce reliance on imports. This comes after Civil Aviation Ministry called for curbing imports of aircraft, which has gone up by 56% in the first 6 months of this fiscal. Speaking to me, Salil Gupte added that the government should reduce custom duties on MRO services and must consider a PLI scheme for aerospace. Listen in.
To increase manufacturing in India, you have to build that capability step by step by step. You have to build the overall ecosystem. You have to build clusters of capability. And then over time, you can get up to things like final assembly, and you have an end-to-end ecosystem to ultimately build and develop your own platform.
Right.
So that step-by-step approach that we're taking is what we would hope all participants in the space take, and that's what's going to allow this sector to grow and meet the government's goals.
All right, so that was the aviation sector's budget wish list. But moving on to the winter session of Parliament, which kicked off today. This session will have 17 working days and ends on December 29. The Centre is likely to table 16 new bills in Parliament, including the Trademarks Amendment Bill and Multi-State Cooperatives Society Bill. Prime Minister Narendra Modi appealed to all parties for a productive session.
मैं बहुत ही आग्रह के साथ सभी दलों से, सभी सांसदों से इस सत्र को और अधिक प्रोडक्टिव बनाने की दिशा में सामूहिक प्रयास हो.
Well, you heard Prime Minister Modi urging parliamentarians to make the winter session more productive. Leaders of 13 political parties met this morning and 20 issues have been identified to be raised this winter session. The government also replied to questions of parliamentarians on various economic issues. Coal Ministry told Parliament that total import of coal increased to 38.8 million tonnes in FY23 compared to 27 million tonnes in the whole of FY22. Much of the increase in import has gone to feed domestic coal-based plants, and the restoration of power generation by ICB plants to its potential level has remained slow. Responding to a question on whether Concorde divestment would be completed by FY23, the Ministry of Railways said that the government has recently conducted meetings with potential investors. Any further steps will be taken on basis of evaluation of interest and successful completion of process under the prevailing market conditions. Ministry of Communications said that 5G services have started in 50 towns. The Road Transport Ministry apprised Parliament that over 18 lakh electric vehicles are now registered in the country, and there are 5,151 operational public EV charging stations. And coming up next, India's wedding industry is back with a bang after the pandemic blow. A special report coming up. Welcome back. You're watching India Business Hour. The Aam Aadmi Party has won a majority in the 250 ward Delhi Civic body. Looks set to wrest control from the BJP. After 15 years, this is the first election after the reunification of the three Delhi-based municipal corporations. The Congress comes a distant third. Abhimanyu Sharma has this report.
अब अपने को सबको मिलके काम करना है, सबको मिलके दिल्ली ठीक करनी है। इसमें मैं बीजेपी का भी सहयोग चाहता हूं, इसमें मैं कांग्रेस का भी सहयोग चाहता हूं, मैं सबका सहयोग चाहता हूं।
The Aam Aadmi Party has ended the BJP's 15-year-old rule in the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, winning over 130 out of the 250 wards of the municipal body. Battling an anti-incumbency of 3 successive terms in the corporation, the BJP managed to win over 100 seats, while the Congress party's tally dipped further compared to the previous election.
एक प्रकार से आम आदमी पार्टी की हार हो चुकी है, और वो कहते थे हम 220 सीट लाएंगे। ऐसी थंपिंग मेजॉरिटी का दावा करने वाले लोग आज किधर बैठे हैं, उनका चेहरा देखना चाहिए।
The reunified MCD is slated to present its first full-fledged budget tomorrow for the financial year 2023-24, pegged at around rupees 15,000 crores. The municipal budget for now is not expected to include any new project or scheme, as it was finalized when the model code of conduct was in force. The Aam Aadmi Party had repeatedly accused the BJP of financial impropriety, delay in salaries of municipal workers, and failure to clear mounds of garbage. It will be interesting to note how the Aam Aadmi Party fares in its maiden foray at the helm of the municipal corporation, as it also manages the state government in the national capital, which provides funds to the municipal corporation.
All right, thanks Abhimanyu for joining us. Now another report from Abhimanyu, and this is about India's wedding industry, which had taken a hit during the pandemic. It's now getting back with a bang. According to industry estimates, 32 lakh weddings are set to take place in India over the next 1 month. For those in the business of organizing weddings, this could mean earnings of 3.7 lakh crore rupees. So what are the big trends this festive season? Abhimanyu gets you more.
It's the season for Band Baja Barat, that time of the year when families go all out to celebrate the weddings of their sons and daughters. While inflation is making people slash wedding budgets, it surely has not dampened the spirits.
बजट थोड़ा सा ऊपर गया है, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है, क्योंकि बुकिंग की वजह से भी काफ़ी क्राउड की वजह से हर किसी ने अपने रेट्स बढ़ा दिए। किसी भी चीज़ की बुकिंग हो, चाहे म्यूज़िक की हो या कोई थीम हो, कुछ भी हो, सब नए तरीके से जा रहे हैं। हर किसी पेरेंट्स की पूरी उम्मीद होती है, पूरी कोशिश होती है कि अच्छी शादी हो, चाहे कटौती ना हो, किसी तरह उस चीज़ को बढ़ चढ़ के किया जाए।
2 years of the pandemic and rising costs have put a lot of pressure on wedding bands and everyone associated with them.
कोरोना से पहले जो घोड़े का खाने का सामान था वो सस्ता था, अब उस कोरोना के बाद बहुत महंगा है और बाजे भी महंगे हो गए हैं और जो उनकी ड्रेसेस हैं वो भी महंगी हो गई हैं। है उतना ही काम, पर जो इनकम पहले थी वो इस टाइम नहीं है। शादियां जरूर हैं पर डिमांड कम है।
The number of people choosing destination weddings is going up every year, but most families still want marriages to take place in their hometown or place of residence. This year, guest lists are becoming smaller, but people are spending a lot of money on decorations and offering a variety of cuisines from India and abroad.
पहले डेस्टिनेशन की तरफ लोगों का जो रुझान बढ़ा था वो कोरोना पीरियड में बढ़ा था। पहले जो लोग गैदरिंग बढ़ाते थे 800 लोगों की, 1000, 1500, 2000 तक की गैदरिंग जो हो जाती थी, अब क्या कि डेस्टिनेशन में लोग 200-300 लोगों को बुलाया, खर्चा उतना ही होता है। वो कॉन्टिनेंटल चाहते हैं, वो मैक्सिकन चाहते हैं, वो अपना जापानीज फूड चाहते हैं।
Theme parties as part of wedding festivities are very much in vogue, and wedding planners are fully leveraging this opportunity.
Customers are looking for something which is more on an international and global level rather than keeping it very Indian or ethnic. Now people are having like a Great Gatsby theme, a nice, probably a Goan theme, and they're creating a setup which probably looks like a part of a country or a city at their functions.
Traders and wedding planners say that the wedding season in 2019 led to a business of rupees 2.5 lakh crores, and this year's estimate for the wedding season is rupees 3.75 lakh crores. The increase in business expectations is not just due to a rise in destination weddings, but also possibly due to an increase in spend on decoration, exotic themes and global cuisines, while trimming down the guest list. In Delhi with video journalists Rajendra Lakshman and H.K. Patra, this is Abhimanyu Sharma for CNBC-TV18.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you for watching. But before we go, Volodymyr Zelensky and the spirit of Ukraine have been named as Time Magazine's Person of the Year. The magazine's editor-in-chief wrote, whether the battle for Ukraine fills one with hope or with fear, Volodymyr Zelensky galvanized the world in a way we haven't seen in decades. Goodbye.